how these stones were once upon a time in these fields, and they would have been problematic for farmers who were trying to plow, and the stones would have just been in the way, would have damaged their implements and harmed their crops. And so sometime in the past, be it a couple of centuries ago, decades ago, who knows, some people set to work in these fields removing all the stones because they were a problem, they were a hindrance. And once they had done that, they stacked them up and they put them to good use. They created these walls to demarcate boundaries, to keep out that which needed to be kept out, and to keep in that which they wanted in. And I've been thinking about our lives and how often our lives are scattered with stones, emotional burdens and things from the past, and wondering how those hinder us moving forward and living the lives that we could live, prosperous lives, lives full of good things. I guess we all inherit fields of stones from our parents, from our childhoods. Part of what we do throughout our lives is trying to remove those and stack them up and turn them into something useful. While thinking about these stone walls, I've been thinking about the film The War Horse. And in that, a young man, Albert, has a thoroughbred horse that his father buys almost in an act of passion in an auction. And he has a field that is full of stones which needs to be ploughed. And the landlord says, well, if you don't get it ploughed sometime in October, then I'm going to throw you off this farm because you owe me so much money. And so the landlord has a vested interest in that farm not producing, in that field not being ploughed. And the farmer's son, Albert, sets out to plough this field with a horse that is poorly equipped for the task. And they start out and the ground is hard. The horse, Joey, gets it and there's a bit of rain that softens the ground and the plough starts to dig in. They're doing really well. And then Joey takes off and Albert can't slow him down. And there's a huge rock. And Albert cries out, Joey, stop! You're going to destroy the plough. And the plough hits the rock. And in that moment you think the plough is going to break and it's going to be the end of the story of this field being ploughed. But instead the rock breaks. They break ground and they get it ploughed. Stones in our lives stop our productiveness, they stop our joy, and they slowly need to be picked out of the way. Not only because they mess with our production, but because they can often break our plough. I don't know about you, but my experience in life has been getting the actual job done is only often 30% of what saps the energy. What really saps the energy is the other 70% of dealing with people, working out how to get people on sides, finding people who object to what you're doing, sometimes because they have a horse in the race, sometimes because they stand to benefit from it, sometimes just because they're difficult. A few years ago, I started a project to provide toasted sandwiches to high school children. And I had partnered with an organization that had American roots. And maybe it was because one of the people I was working with was anti-anything American. Who knows? But as we tried to progress, he just kept throwing stones in the field. We would get everything sorted out, and then he would protest and say, no, but you've got to get this bit of legislation sorted out. And we would get it sorted out, and then we'd come back and say, no. He'd say, no, I disagree. You need to do it in a different way. And he kept filibustering. He kept slowing us down simply because he didn't want the project to run. And the problem is, it wasn't only the project that was at risk. There was the health of a number of people involved, my health included. And there were days when it got to the point where it almost broke my plow, where the size of the stones that he was throwing into the field I was trying to work in were just so big and so critical and so crucial that they almost destroyed me, not just the project. It makes me think of a story in 2 Kings 3, where the king of Israel and the king of Judah get together to take on Moab, because Moab has refused to pay their dues to Israel. They're subservient to them, they're being taxed by Israel, and they decide they're not going to pay, they're just going to keep their money. And so the kings of Israel and Judah go to war against Moab, and they defeat them in this battle. But they don't only defeat them, but once they've defeated them, each soldier from Israel or Judah picks up a stone and throws it into the fields of the Moabites. The fields that they would be plowing to produce food for their children, for their wives, for their parents. They throw stones into their fields to destroy their futures, to reduce what they can achieve tomorrow. And I wonder how many times people, even myself, have been guilty of throwing stones into the fields of others. In the case of Israel and Judah in 2 Kings 3, there was a political advantage by having a weak neighboring country that they could dominate whenever they wanted to. Sometimes we interfere in other people's lives because we want to keep others weak. We want to be strong. We don't want to have to work really hard to keep up. And so we keep others poorer, weaker, more vulnerable around us. Sometimes there's political gain to be had, to have power by somebody else who can't get things done as they want to. Sometimes it's just collective. Someone's hurt me, I'm going to hurt them back. Someone's made me go to war, and so I'm not just going to take the victory, I'm going to squash them so that they can never rise up against me again. And so we throw stones in their fields. So I've been wondering, is there ever a time when these stones ought to be thrown back into that field? Is that ever justified? Is it ever justified to throw stones into the fields of somebody else's life? In Ecclesiastes 3, it speaks of a time to gather, a time to spread. And one of the lines in Ecclesiastes 3 says, there's a time to gather stones and a time to spread them, to throw them, to discard them. It's speaking of what we see right in front of us. There's a time to take the stones out of a field and build a wall, and there's a time to just take them and throw them back in the field and walk away. And so if that is true, when are those times to throw the stones back in the field? I've been speaking a bit recently about my experiences in South Africa. There were people in underprivileged areas where the police would raid every single night. They would shine bright lights and terrorize the neighborhood. They would break into houses and do searches on the spot for political material, communist material. Mothers and fathers were being carried off to be interrogated and imprisoned. And one of the defenses that people in those townships had was to take rocks and place them in the roads, to make the roads impossible impassable. So pedestrians could walk, but cars could not drive. And I think there are times when we're seeing injustice, abuse. I think there are times when we ought to be throwing rocks in the way of those who would use their power to hold others subservient. Sometimes we need to throw rocks in their way to actually give others a fighting chance. But I don't think we are ever called to use our power and our privilege to throw rocks in the way of others who are more vulnerable, weaker, less privileged than we are. So here's the challenge. Can you identify the rocks in your field? Can you identify the things that slow you down? Because taking a little bit of time to get them out the way may free up a whole lot of energy for you to do the things you really ought to be doing. Are there any rocks in your field that threaten to break your plow? Not only to stop you being productive, but to actually harm you. What resources do you have? Who can help you to lift those rocks, to move them? You can't do it all alone. But just maybe there's someone who can help you with that. Reach out to those around you. I find it tragic in the story of Warhorse that Albert is trying to plow a field full of rocks, and there are 20, 30, 40 onlookers. And rather than anybody getting in to help him, even his friends, all they do is watch. Is there someone you know who is struggling with rocks in their field? Are you able to help? Could you help to lift some of those out the way so that they could live a better life? Christ comes, the stone was rejected, and he becomes the cornerstone. He becomes the capstone. He was a stone that people looked at and thought, you're not worth much. Look at you. You're unappealing physically. You don't come from good stock. You don't have money. You don't have political roots and allies. And so people pass over him. And yet, he is God incarnate. Yet he is the one upon which heaven on earth is founded. It started with him laying down his life and taking up a new life for us. Will we be like Christ, our cornerstone? Will we continue to build? Will we continue to lift up? Will we continue to clear the way? Or will we continue to just let the world live in chaos? May God bless you. May God bless you as you clear your field. May the fruit of your life